The night I spent my last $20 on a stranger was the night New York's most feared man decided I belonged under his protection. Rain hammered against the side of the M14 bus hard enough to make the windows shake in their frames, each drop streaking the glass with blurry ribbons of yellow and red from the traffic lights outside. Manhattan looked cold that night. Not beautiful cold, lonely cold. The kind that crawled into your bones after a 12-hour shift and made you question every decision that brought you to this city in the first place. I sat near the back of the bus with my diner apron folded inside my tote bag and my sneakers soaked through from walking 6 blocks in the storm because I was trying to save money on subway fare. My phone buzzed again in my coat pocket. Another hospital bill reminder for my mother's treatment. Another number I couldn't afford. I didn't check it. I already knew what it said. Past due. Everything in my life felt past due lately. Sleep. Rent. Hope. The bus lurched to another stop near 9th Avenue. Brakes hissing loud enough to turn heads, and that's when he stepped on. Tall, broad shoulders beneath a black wool coat darkened by rain. Water dripped from the ends of his dark hair onto the rubber floor while the driver barely looked up from his screen. Fare, the driver muttered. The man reached into his pocket slowly, then stopped. Empty. For a second, nobody said anything. The passengers avoided eye contact the same way New Yorkers always do when something uncomfortable happens close enough to become real. No money, no ride. The driver snapped louder this time. Move it. The stranger didn't argue, didn't beg. He just stood there under the flickering fluorescent lights with rainwater sliding down the sharp line of his jaw, one hand gripping the overhead rail like he was trying very hard not to lose his balance. Something about him felt wrong for this bus. Not dangerous exactly, just out of place. His coat looked expensive, even soaked through. His watch caught the light for half a second, silver and impossibly clean against bruised knuckles that looked freshly split. Then I noticed the blood, just a little, near the cuff of his sleeve before he covered it with his hand. Sir, the driver barked impatiently. Either pay or get off. The man finally spoke, his voice low and rough around the edges. My wallet was stolen. Nobody moved. A woman near the front sighed dramatically and turned up her headphones. 2 college kids snickered under their breath. The driver pointed toward the door. Not my problem. I don't know why I did it. Maybe because he looked exhausted in a way I understood. Maybe because my dad used to say the worst thing a city can do is teach people not to care about each other. Or maybe because for 1 second beneath all that silence and expensive fabric, he looked human. Tired. Alone. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the last $20 bill I had until payday. I've got it, I said quietly. The driver took the money without hesitation. The stranger turned toward me slowly, those pale green eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that made my stomach tighten. Up close, he looked even more striking. Early 30s maybe. Sharp cheekbones. Dark stubble. A faint scar near his chin half hidden beneath rainwater and shadow. But it was his expression that unsettled me most. Not surprise. Not gratitude. Confusion. Like kindness was something he hadn't seen in a very long time. Why would you do that? He asked. I shrugged, trying to ignore the strange heaviness in his gaze. Because it's raining, I said. For the first time since stepping onto the bus, something in his face shifted. Not quite a smile. Something sadder than that. Then he sat beside me while the city blurred past outside in rivers of gold and smoke and rain. And I had absolutely no idea that the man sitting inches away from me controlled half the underworld of New York City. The bus rattled through Midtown while rain battered the roof hard enough to drown out the traffic outside, and for the next 10 minutes neither of us spoke. I kept staring out the fogged window, pretending not to notice him beside me, but it was impossible not to feel his presence. He carried silence differently than normal people. Heavy, controlled. Like the entire bus had unconsciously shifted around him without realizing it. Every time the streetlights flashed through the glass, I caught pieces of him in the reflection. The expensive black coat stretched across broad shoulders, the faint bruise darkening the side of his neck. Hands too clean to belong to a construction worker, but too rough to belong to a businessman. There were old scars across his knuckles, the kind people do not get from office jobs. You should not have done that, he said finally, his voice low enough that only I could hear it. I glanced over. Paid for your ride? Spent your last $20 on a stranger. My stomach tightened instantly. How do you know it was my last 20? One corner of his mouth moved slightly. Because you checked your bank app 3 times after handing it over. Heat rushed into my cheeks. I hated that he noticed things like that. Outside, thunder rolled across the city while the bus slowed near Times Square, neon lights bleeding across the rain-soaked pavement like melted paint. The passengers around us barely looked up from their phones. Nobody noticed the man beside me sitting perfectly still with blood drying near his cuff like it meant nothing. You should probably get that looked at, I muttered before I could stop myself. His eyes shifted down briefly toward his sleeve. It looks worse than it is. That usually means it is bad. For a second, I thought I saw amusement flicker across his face again. Tiny. Gone almost immediately. You always worry about strangers? He asked. Only the ones bleeding on public transportation. That actually earned a quiet breath of laughter from him. Not loud. Not warm exactly. Just surprised. Like he had forgotten how. The bus hit a pothole hard enough to shake the seats, and his hand shot out automatically toward the edge of mine resting beside me. Fast reflexes. Protective reflexes. He stopped himself before touching me, fingers curling back slowly. But I noticed it. So did he. The air between us changed after that. Thicker somehow. Outside the windows, the rain kept falling in silver sheets while Manhattan blurred past in red taillights and glowing storefronts. Then the bus pulled to a stop near 57th Street. The doors hissed open, and everything changed. 3 black SUVs sat at the curb with headlights cutting through the storm. Men in dark suits stepped out almost immediately, scanning the street with sharp attention that made every instinct in my body wake up. One of them spotted the man beside me and visibly exhaled in relief. Boss. The word landed like ice water down my spine. Every passenger suddenly looked up. The driver went pale. The men outside moved quickly but respectfully, creating a shield around the bus entrance without touching anyone. The stranger beside me stood slowly, adjusting his soaked coat with calm precision. He looked different now, bigger somehow, dangerous in a way my brain had not fully processed before. One of the suited men held out an umbrella instantly. Another murmured something urgent in Italian. Boss. My pulse started hammering so loudly I barely heard the rain anymore. The stranger turned toward me one last time. Up close. Those pale green eyes looked almost unreal beneath the flickering bus lights. Claire Bennett, he said quietly. My breath caught. I had never told him my name. Fear crawled slowly up my spine. How do you know that? He studied me for half a second like he was memorizing my face. Because in my world, he said softly, people who show kindness matter. Then he stepped off the bus into the storm while a line of black umbrellas opened around him like shadows swallowing a king, and every single person on that bus watched in stunned silence as the stranger I had helped disappeared into a convoy that looked powerful enough to own the entire city. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw black SUVs lined up beneath the rain and men in expensive suits calling him boss like the word meant life or death. My apartment radiator clanged sometime around 4 in the morning, dragging me awake from another restless hour on the couch beside my mother's room. The entire apartment smelled faintly like old coffee and medicine. Home. Small. Tired. Real. Nothing like the world that man came from. I stood at the kitchen sink staring out the fogged window while the storm finally began to fade over Brooklyn. Somewhere across the city, a man with pale green eyes and blood on his sleeve probably slept in a penthouse guarded by armed security while I counted quarters beside overdue bills. The difference between our lives felt impossible, and yet I could still hear his voice in my head. People who show kindness matter. I hated that the word stayed with me. By 7:30, I was already walking to my morning shift at Rosie's Diner with exhaustion sitting heavy behind my eyes. The sidewalks glistened from the rain, steam curling from subway grates while yellow cabs splashed through puddles beside commuters clutching coffee cups like survival kits. New York moved fast enough to erase strange nights. That was the rule here. Keep moving. Keep surviving. Forget everything else. I tried to follow it. Claire, table 6 needs coffee. My manager snapped the second I tied my apron on. Rosie smelled like bacon grease, burnt toast, and cheap syrup soaked into decades-old booths. Familiar chaos. Safe chaos. The breakfast rush hit hard by 8 o'clock, and for 2 straight hours I lost myself in refills, pancakes, tired businessmen, and tourists asking if celebrities actually ate there. Nobody noticed how distracted I was except Mia, another waitress who had worked beside me for almost 3 years. You look terrible, she whispered while stacking plates beside the counter. Thanks. You always know exactly what to say to a woman. No, seriously. You look like you saw a ghost. I almost laughed at that. If only she knew. Around 10:15, the bell above the diner door chimed softly, and every instinct in my body suddenly tightened. I looked up automatically. It was not him, just another customer in a gray coat. Still, my pulse took almost a full minute to calm down. Ridiculous. I told myself I was being ridiculous. Men like that did not think about girls from Brooklyn twice. By noon, the crowd finally thinned enough for me to breathe again. I was wiping down booth 7 when Rosie herself appeared from the kitchen, holding a white envelope. This came for you. My stomach dropped immediately. What is it? I do not know. Some fancy guy dropped it off 20 minutes ago. Fancy guy? The envelope was thick, cream-colored paper with my name written across the front in sharp black ink. Claire Bennett. No stamp. No address. My fingers suddenly felt cold. You okay? Rosie asked carefully. Yeah. Lie. I slid one finger beneath the seal slowly while the sounds of clinking dishes and old rock music faded into the background. Inside was a single folded piece of paper. No greeting. No signature. Just one sentence typed neatly across the center. Thank you for seeing a human being when everyone else saw inconvenience. Beneath the note sat a hospital receipt. Paid in full. My mother's balance. Every treatment. Every overdue charge. $17,412. Paid this morning at 8:13 a.m. My knees nearly gave out beneath me. Claire. Mia's voice sounded far away now. I stared at the receipt while my heartbeat turned uneven inside my chest. He found my mother's hospital account overnight. He knew where I worked. He knew my full name before stepping off that bus. And somehow that terrified me even more than the money itself. Then I noticed the final line handwritten at the bottom of the page in dark ink. This city has not been kind to you. Let me change that. I read the note so many times that afternoon the edges of the paper started to soften beneath my fingers. Thank you for seeing a human being when everyone else saw inconvenience. The words followed me through the rest of my shift like a second heartbeat. Every coffee refill, every order pad, every time the diner door opened, I looked up expecting to see pale green eyes and a black wool coat standing beneath the neon glow outside. But he never came. By the time I finished work, the sky over Brooklyn had turned the color of dirty snow. Heavy clouds hanging low between the buildings while cold wind curled through the streets hard enough to sting my face. I walked home with the envelope tucked tightly inside my coat, like someone might steal it. $17,000. Gone overnight like it was nothing to him. That kind of money would have taken me years to save. Years I did not have. The elevator in my apartment building still smelled like cigarettes and wet concrete. It groaned all the way to the 5th floor while fluorescent lights flickered overhead like they were fighting to stay alive. Home. Same cracked hallway paint. Same broken mailbox downstairs. Same neighbors yelling through thin walls. Nothing had changed. And yet somehow everything had. My mother was awake when I stepped inside the apartment, curled beneath a faded blanket on the couch, with daytime television glowing softly across tired features that looked older than 53. Cancer had a way of stealing years from people before anyone realized they were gone. You are late, she murmured gently. Double shift. I slipped off my coat slowly, trying to act normal even though my heart still felt unsteady. Did the hospital call today? Her expression changed instantly. Confused. Actually, yes. They said there was some kind of mistake with the billing. My stomach tightened. What did they say exactly? That my account balance was cleared. She gave a weak laugh. I told them they must have confused me with somebody rich. I could not breathe for a second. Hearing it out loud made everything feel even more unreal. My mother studied my face carefully. Claire. Mothers always know. Even exhausted ones. What happened? I sat beside her slowly and handed her the receipt without speaking. I watched her eyes move across the page. Watched the color drain from her face line by line. Who did this? She whispered. I thought about lying. Instead, I stared at the rain tapping softly against the living room window. I helped someone last night. Someone. I paid his bus fare. Silence. Then my mother blinked slowly like she was trying to understand if I had finally lost my mind from stress. Claire Bennett, she said carefully. What kind of man pays $17,000 back for a bus ride? I already knew the answer. The dangerous kind. That night, I could not sleep again. Around 1:30 in the morning, I stood by the kitchen sink drinking stale coffee while headlights crawled across the street below. Brooklyn never really slept. Sirens echoed somewhere far away. Music drifted faintly from another apartment. Ordinary city sounds. Then I noticed the black SUV parked across from my building. My pulse slowed instantly. It sat beneath a broken street lamp with tinted windows reflecting the wet pavement. Engine running. Motionless. Watching. I told myself it could belong to anyone. But deep down I knew better. The vehicle remained there another 20 minutes before finally pulling away into the night. The next morning things became even stranger. The landlord who had threatened eviction suddenly smiled at me in the hallway for the first time in 3 years. "Take your time with rent," he said quickly without meeting my eyes. "No rush. No rush." This man once charged us extra for replacing a broken smoke detector. At the diner, Rosie announced somebody anonymously paid for repairs to the leaking kitchen ceiling. Mia discovered her overdue electric bill had mysteriously disappeared. Good things started happening around me like invisible dominoes tipping one after another. Everywhere I went, problems vanished before I could touch them. It should have felt comforting. Instead, it terrified me. Because powerful men did not change entire lives over kindness. Not unless kindness meant something dangerous to them. Then late that evening my phone buzzed with an unknown number. One message appeared across the screen. "Did your mother smile today?" I stared at the words while cold crept slowly through my chest. A second message arrived before I could respond. "That matters to me now." For 3 days, my life stopped feeling like my own. Everywhere I went, invisible hands reached my problems before I could. The pharmacy suddenly approved my mother's medication extension after rejecting it twice last month. The cracked heater in our apartment got replaced overnight without the landlord charging us $1. Even Rosie looked confused when a brand new espresso machine arrived at the diner with no return address attached. "Maybe God finally remembered Brooklyn exists," she muttered while staring at the shipping invoice. But I knew better. Gods do not text you asking whether your mother smiled today. Powerful men do. And somehow that frightened me more than if Luca Moretti had simply disappeared after the bus ride. Because disappearing would have been normal. This felt personal. That Thursday evening, I left the diner just after 9, carrying leftover pie slices Rosie packed for my mother in a paper container wrapped with tape. The air smelled like wet asphalt and roasted nuts from a street cart parked near the subway entrance. Manhattan glowed across the river while cold wind whipped loose strands of hair across my face. I pulled my coat tighter and started toward the bus stop with my headphones in, trying very hard not to think about pale green eyes or black SUVs or handwritten notes that somehow kept rearranging my entire world. Then somebody grabbed my wrist. "You have been ignoring my calls." My entire body tensed instantly before I recognized the voice. Ethan. My ex-boyfriend stood half inside the shadows beside the laundromat, hands shoved into the pockets of a leather jacket that still smelled faintly like cigarettes and cheap cologne. I had not seen him in almost 2 months. Not since he decided my mother's hospital bills made me too complicated. "Let go of me," I said quietly. His grip loosened, but did not disappear completely. "I just want to talk." At 9:30 at night outside a laundromat. Very romantic. He ignored the comment, eyes narrowing as he looked me over. "You have been acting weird lately." "You mean happier? You suddenly caught up on rent." My stomach dropped slightly. "How do you know about my rent?" "Brooklyn talks, Claire." He stepped closer. "You seeing somebody?" The question landed wrong immediately. Possessive. Sharp around the edges. I tried pulling my arm free again. "That stopped being your business when you left." His jaw tightened. "You think you are too good for me now because somebody tossed money at your problems?" Before I could answer, headlights swept across the sidewalk. Slow. Deliberate. A black SUV rolled silently to the curb beside us like something out of a movie too expensive for real life. My heartbeat stumbled instantly. Ethan stepped back automatically. The rear passenger door opened first. One man exited wearing a dark suit and gloves despite the mild weather. Another followed from the front seat, scanning the sidewalk, with calm attention that made pedestrians instinctively cross the street. Then Luca stepped out. Everything around him felt quieter somehow. Controlled. He wore a charcoal coat over a black suit. Rain-dark hair brushed neatly back now instead of falling across his forehead like the night on the bus. No blood. No exhaustion. just power wrapped in expensive fabric and stillness sharp enough to cut through the city noise. Ethan's fingers disappeared from my wrist immediately. Luca noticed anyway. I saw it happen in his eyes. One glance. One detail. That was all it took. Claire. His voice settled over my name softly while he approached. Not rushed. Not angry. Somehow that made him more intimidating. Are you all right? I nodded too quickly. Fine. Ethan looked between us with visible confusion. Who the hell is this? Luca finally turned toward him fully. Calm. Polite. Terrifyingly calm. The better question, he said evenly, is why you thought grabbing her was acceptable. The street suddenly felt colder. Cars hissed through puddles nearby, while steam curled from a subway grate beside us. Ethan tried to laugh, but the sound came out thin. Look, man, this is between me and my girl. Luca's expression never changed. No, he said softly. It is not. Silence stretched between them for one long second. Then Luca stepped closer to me instead, his attention returning completely, like Ethan no longer mattered enough to look at. Your mother's nurse said she finally ate dinner tonight, he murmured quietly. That is good. My breath caught. You spoke to her nurse? I make it my business to protect what matters to me. The words settled heavily in the cold night air while my pulse climbed somewhere near panic. Because I realized two things at once standing there beneath the glow of streetlights and passing headlights. First, Luca Moretti had woven himself into every corner of my life without asking permission. And second, a part of me was beginning to wait for him. The strange part was not that Luca Moretti frightened me. The strange part was how quickly fear stopped being the strongest thing I felt around him. After that night outside the laundromat, he started appearing in my life like a shadow that somehow always arrived before trouble did. Never loudly, never with unnecessary words. Just there, waiting, watching, protecting. 3 nights later, I finished another late shift at Rosie's just after 11. My feet ached, my hair smelled like fryer grease, and all I wanted was a hot shower and 6 uninterrupted hours of sleep. Brooklyn streets shimmered from fresh rain while old jazz drifted from a bar down the block. I had barely stepped onto the sidewalk when a familiar black SUV rolled quietly to the curb beside me. The tinted rear window lowered halfway. Luca sat inside beneath soft amber lighting, one hand resting against the leather seat beside him. Get in, Claire. No greeting. No explanation. Somehow that irritated me more than if he had ordered me around. I tightened my grip on my tote bag. Do you always appear out of nowhere like some emotionally unavailable Batman? To my surprise, the corner of his mouth lifted slightly. Only for women who keep walking home alone after midnight. I have survived 24 years without mafia security. And I would prefer you survive 25. The answer hit harder than it should have. Warmth flickered briefly through my chest before common sense rushed back in. You cannot keep inserting yourself into my life. Luca's expression softened just enough to become dangerous in a completely different way. Claire, he said quietly, I already am. Rain tapped softly against the SUV roof while the city hummed around us in blurred headlights and distant sirens. I should have walked away. Instead, I slid inside. The door shut with a heavy silence that instantly cut off the outside world. The interior smelled like leather, cedar, and faint traces of Luca's cologne. Rich, clean, expensive enough to make me hyper-aware of my diner uniform and scuffed sneakers. Across from us sat another man in a dark suit scrolling through something on a tablet before immediately looking away to give us privacy. Privacy inside a moving fortress. Normal people did not live like this. Luca noticed me studying the vehicle. You are uncomfortable. I am sitting inside a car that probably costs more than my apartment building. That building should be condemned. I blinked. You know where I live. Of course I do. There was no arrogance in the answer. Just certainty. Like protecting people required information the same way breathing required oxygen. The SUV moved smoothly through Manhattan traffic while rainwater streaked the windows in silver lines. Where are we going? I asked carefully. Luca adjusted the cuff of his black coat, exposing the silver watch I remembered from the bus. You have not eaten dinner. That is your emergency? You skipped lunch too. I stared at him. Are you having me followed? Protected. That is not better. Another tiny flicker of amusement crossed his face before disappearing again. The SUV finally stopped outside a quiet Italian restaurant tucked between 2 office buildings near the Upper East Side. No flashing signs. No crowd. just soft golden lights spilling across wet pavement. One employee opened the door before Luca even reached it. Inside, the restaurant was nearly empty except for a few sharply dressed men who immediately stood when Luca entered. Not dramatically, respectfully. Power moved differently around him. Invisible, but absolute. Mr. Moretti, the manager greeted instantly. Luca nodded once before guiding me toward a private corner booth. Every eye in the room followed us without being obvious about it. I lowered my voice the second we sat down. People are scared of you. Luca looked at me steadily across the candlelight. Are you? The honest answer should have been yes. Instead, I found myself watching rain slide down the restaurant windows while soft piano music floated through the room. I think, I admitted quietly, you are lonely. Silence settled between us. Heavy. Unexpected. Luca leaned back slowly, pale green eyes never leaving mine. For the first time since meeting him, something cracked slightly beneath all that control. Not weakness. Sadness. Deep enough to drown in. Then he spoke so softly I almost missed it. Nobody has ever said that to me before. At that exact moment his phone buzzed against the table. One glance at the screen changed his entire expression. The softness vanished. Instantly, cold focus replaced it so fast it made my stomach tighten. Luca answered in Italian, voice low and razor calm, while every suited man in the restaurant suddenly straightened around us. I did not understand the words, but I understood danger when the room went silent. The warmth disappeared from Luca's eyes so quickly it felt like watching a door slam shut in the middle of a conversation. 1 second he was sitting across from me beneath soft candlelight looking unexpectedly human, and the next he looked exactly like the man people whispered about in this city. Cold, focused, untouchable. He listened silently to whoever was speaking on the phone, jaw tightening once before he answered in sharp Italian too fast for me to follow. Around us, every suited man in the restaurant became alert without drawing attention to it. Tiny shifts, straightened shoulders, eyes toward exits. The air itself seemed to tense. Luca ended the call slowly and placed the phone face down on the table. I need to leave. Okay. My voice sounded smaller than I intended. He studied me for one brief second like he was deciding something internally. Then he stood and held out his hand toward me. You are coming with me. I blinked. What? It is not safe for you to go home alone tonight. Irritation flared instantly beneath my confusion. You cannot just decide things for me because somebody called your phone. Claire. His tone stayed calm, which somehow only made me more stubborn. I appreciate everything you have done for my mother, but you do not own me. Something flickered across his face at that. Not anger. Something quieter. I know, he said softly. That is why I am asking instead of ordering. The honesty in the answer caught me off guard long enough for silence to settle between us again. Outside the restaurant windows, rain had started falling harder, streaking Manhattan in silver and gold beneath passing headlights. Lucas stepped closer, lowering his voice slightly. Please. Nobody had probably heard that word from him in years. I could feel it. The weight of it. The rarity. Against all common sense, I nodded. The SUV ride felt different this time. Quieter. More serious. Luca barely touched his phone, but every few minutes one of the men in front murmured updates too softly for me to understand. Streetlights flickered across Luca's face while he stared out the rain-covered window beside him. Expression unreadable. Are you going to tell me what is happening? I asked finally. No, that was honest at least. One corner of his mouth moved faintly before disappearing again. 20 minutes later, the SUV passed through iron gates taller than any building near my apartment. My breath caught as the city opened into something that looked impossible inside Manhattan. Stone pathways. Black cars lined beneath towering trees. A mansion glowing warmly against the storm like something hidden from the rest of the world. You live here? Luca glanced toward me. Unfortunately, the front doors opened before we even reached them. Staff moved quietly through marble hallways, while soft classical music drifted somewhere far above us. Everything looked expensive enough to belong in a museum. Massive chandeliers, oil paintings, dark wood polished to a mirror shine. I suddenly became painfully aware of my diner sneakers squeaking against the marble floor. I do not belong in this place, I muttered. Luca removed his coat slowly beside me. Neither do I most days. Before I could answer, one of the staff approached carrying a white medical kit. Luca thanked him in Italian and set the kit on a nearby table. That was when I noticed the blood again. Fresh this time. Dark against the white cuff of his dress shirt. You are hurt. It is nothing. People always say that right before they pass out in emergency rooms. Luca looked down at the stain like he had forgotten it existed. A minor injury. I stepped closer automatically before my brain fully caught up. Sit down. His eyebrows lifted slightly. Excuse me. You paid my mother's hospital bills. The least I can do is stop you from bleeding on your own furniture. For the first time all evening, something softer returned to his expression. Tired. Real. He sat without arguing while rain battered the massive windows behind us. I rolled up the sleeve of his shirt carefully, expecting something terrible. Instead, I found a shallow cut along his forearm already beginning to clot. Relief moved through me so strongly it startled me. This is your emergency? I muttered while cleaning the cut with antiseptic. Luca watched me quietly beneath warm golden light. Most people are afraid to touch me. My hands paused for half a second against his skin. That sounds lonely. He went completely still after that. The room felt silent except for rain and my heartbeat. Then Luca spoke so quietly I almost thought I imagined it. You keep saying things nobody else does. I finished wrapping the bandage carefully before looking up at him. Too close suddenly. Pale green eyes. Tension thick enough to feel in the air between us. And for one dangerous second, neither of us moved. The moment stretched too long. Long enough for me to notice the tiny scar near Luca's jaw beneath the warm chandelier light. Long enough to realize his breathing had slowed while my hands still rested lightly against his bandaged arm. Outside, rain battered the mansion windows in soft, violent waves while thunder rolled somewhere over Manhattan. Neither of us moved. Neither of us looked away. Then one of the guards cleared his throat quietly from the hallway. Reality snapped back instantly. Luca stood so fast the leather chair scraped against marble. What is it? The softness vanished from his voice completely. The guard stepped closer, speaking low enough that I only caught fragments. Vehicle followed. Brooklyn. Luca's expression darkened by the second. How long? Since yesterday evening. Cold spread slowly through my chest. What does that mean? Luca turned toward me immediately. It means somebody has been watching your apartment. My stomach dropped hard enough to hurt. Because of you? The silence that followed answered everything. Luca exhaled slowly through his nose before rubbing one hand across his jaw, like he was forcing himself to stay calm. You should not have become visible to me. The words landed heavier than I expected. Visible. People notice when I care about something. Something, not someone. Maybe that should have bothered me. Instead, I noticed the exhaustion behind. His eyes again. The fear. Not for himself. For me. Luca stepped closer carefully, like approaching a frightened animal. Claire, listen to me very carefully. His voice lowered. Controlled. There are people in this city who hurt others simply to send messages. A chill moved down my spine. Are you saying somebody might come after my mother? Not if I can prevent it. The certainty in his tone should have comforted me. Somehow it only made everything feel more real. I looked around the enormous room, suddenly aware of the cameras hidden near the ceilings, the guards moving quietly through hallways, the layers of protection wrapped around Luca's world like armor. This was not drama, not fantasy. Men did not build lives like this unless danger followed them everywhere. I should go home, I whispered. Luca's jaw tightened instantly. No, I cannot hide in a mansion because your enemies exist. You are not hiding. Then what am I doing? His eyes locked onto mine with frightening intensity. Surviving. Silence crashed between us. Rain hammered harder against the windows, while somewhere deeper inside the mansion, a phone rang sharply. I suddenly felt exhausted all over again. Exhausted from fear, from confusion, from the way this man had entered my life like a storm and rearranged everything inside it. I paid for your bus fare, I said quietly, almost laughing from disbelief. That was supposed to be the end of it. Luca stared at me for a long second before answering. For me, he said softly. That was the beginning. The honesty in his voice hit harder than any dramatic declaration could have. Before I could respond, another guard appeared near the doorway. Boss. Luca turned sharply. What? We found the car near Miss Bennett's building. The room changed instantly again. Not panic. Worse. Precision. Every guard straightened. Luca's face became unreadable in that terrifying calm way I was beginning to understand meant something serious. Who? He asked quietly. Not local crews. We are still identifying them. Luca nodded once. Just once. But the temperature in the room seemed to drop anyway. Double security at the hospital, he ordered. Nobody approaches her mother without clearance. My heartbeat stumbled painfully. Luca. He looked back at me immediately, expression softening by a fraction. You are staying here tonight. It was not a question this time. Maybe because fear finally outweighed my stubbornness, I did not argue. An hour later, one of the staff escorted me upstairs to a guest suite larger than my entire apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked rain-covered Manhattan, while a fireplace glowed softly against dark stone walls. Everything smelled faintly like cedar and clean linen. Safe. Too safe. I stood by the window staring down at the city lights far below, trying to process how my life had transformed from diner shifts and overdue bills into armed guards and mafia threats in less than a week. A quiet knock interrupted my thoughts. Luca stood outside the door when I opened it. No jacket now. Just a black dress shirt rolled slightly at the sleeves, the white bandage still wrapped around his arm beneath the fabric. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then he held out a small paper bag toward me. You forgot your pie slices in the SUV. I blinked in surprise before laughing softly for the first time all week. Actual laughter. Warm and startled and real. Luca froze slightly at the sound like he had never heard anything more beautiful in his life. I woke to sunlight spilling across silk sheets that probably cost more than my monthly rent, and for one disorienting second I forgot where I was. Then I heard footsteps outside the bedroom door. Quiet. Controlled. Security. Reality returned all at once. Luca Moretti. The mansion. The black SUV outside my apartment. Fear settled low in my chest again, but softer now somehow. Less sharp than before. I sat up slowly and noticed fresh clothes folded neatly across the armchair beside the fireplace, along with a handwritten note resting on top. Breakfast downstairs when you are ready. No signature. None needed. I stared at the note longer than I should have. The handwriting was sharp and elegant, controlled in the same way Luca spoke. Even his letters looked disciplined. Downstairs smelled like coffee and warm bread when I finally followed the marble staircase into the kitchen. Real kitchen, not the giant polished showpiece I expected. Sunlight poured through massive windows while staff moved quietly between counters. And standing near the espresso machine in a black dress shirt with the sleeves rolled halfway up his forearms was Luca himself. For a moment, he looked almost ordinary. Then he turned toward me, and ordinary disappeared instantly. You slept. It sounded like an accomplishment. Eventually, Luca nodded once toward the dining table where breakfast waited untouched. Pancakes. Fresh fruit. Coffee exactly how I drank it. You had somebody ask Rosie how I take coffee? I asked carefully. No, a faint shadow of amusement crossed his face. You always add 2 sugars when you are stressed. My stomach flipped unexpectedly. He noticed things nobody should notice. That is slightly terrifying. I am aware. I should have laughed. Instead, I found myself studying him across the soft morning light. Without the cold rain and dark suits and tension surrounding him, Luca looked tired. Not physically, deeply, like carrying the weight of too many people and too many secrets for too many years. Do you ever stop working? I asked quietly. No, honest again. Always brutally honest when it mattered. I wrapped both hands around the warm coffee mug while silence settled comfortably between us for the first time since we met. Outside the windows, Manhattan glittered peacefully beneath blue skies like danger did not exist anywhere in the world. Then Luca's phone buzzed against the counter. One glance. His jaw tightened slightly before relaxing again. The car near your apartment is gone. Relief moved through me, so hard my shoulders sagged. Luca noticed immediately. You are safe, Claire. You say that like it is a promise. His pale green eyes lifted toward mine slowly. It is. The words landed somewhere dangerous beneath my ribs. Before I could respond, one of the guards entered the kitchen quietly. Boss, the hospital confirmed Miss Bennett's mother can begin the new treatment Monday. My head snapped toward Luca. What new treatment? The guard immediately looked uncomfortable speaking in front of me. Luca dismissed him with one glance before turning back toward me. There is a specialist at Memorial Sloan Kettering. My heartbeat stumbled. Luca, the doctor believes your mother qualifies for a trial program. Those programs cost thousands of dollars. Then it is fortunate money is not currently your problem. Emotion climbed suddenly into my throat, so fast it hurt. Nobody had ever spoken about my problems like they were temporary before. Manageable. Solvable. I looked down quickly before he could notice my eyes burning. Why are you doing all this for me? The question hung softly between us while sunlight reflected gold across marble floors. Luca stepped closer slowly, stopping just beside my chair. Close enough that I caught the clean scent of cedar and coffee lingering on his shirt. Because everyone else looked through me that night, he said quietly. You did not. My chest tightened painfully. It was bus fare. No, his voice lowered further. It was kindness when you had no reason to offer it. Silence wrapped around us. Warm now instead of tense. Luca reached toward the table slowly before placing something beside my coffee cup. A crisp $20 bill. The exact amount I spent on him that night. I stared at it in confusion. What is this? Your money back. I blinked up at him. After everything you have done? One corner of his mouth lifted faintly. Claire Bennett, he said softly. I learned a long time ago that debts change people. His gaze held mine steadily. I do not want you to stay because you owe me anything. My breath caught completely. Outside the mansion gates, black SUVs still waited like shadows beneath the morning sun. Guards still moved through hallways with hidden weapons beneath tailored jackets. Luca Moretti still ruled a world built on power and fear and secrets I could barely understand. But standing there beside me in quiet morning light, offering back $20 like it mattered more than millions, he did not look like the most feared man in New York City. He looked like someone who had spent his entire life waiting for kindness to